All right, so you've probably heard of the famous opera Turandot, right? The one about the ice-cold princess who makes her suitors answer these impossible riddles. But what if I told you the true story? The real person behind that legend is actually way, way more incredible. We're talking about a real-life warrior princess. Let's get into it.
So this is how the fictional character Princess Turandot was described, a tigerish woman. In the story, if you couldn't solve her 3 riddles, you'd get executed. It's super dramatic, totally unforgettable, and almost completely made up. And this is where things get really interesting. Because the woman who inspired Turandot, nope, she didn't test men's brains, she tested their brawn. She challenged them to one-on-one combat. The stakes weren't exactly life and death, but trust me, they were high. So let's peel back the layers of the legend and meet the real deal. Okay, so who was she? Who is the real woman behind this myth? To find her, we've got to go back into the history books, to the people who were actually there to see her, like the famous explorer Marco Polo. Her name was Khutulun. Born around 1260, she was a direct descendant of Genghis Khan's grandson. So we're talking serious royalty. Her father, Kaidu, was one of the most powerful men in Central Asia. And Khutulun wasn't just some princess sitting on the sidelines. She was a major player in his court, and more importantly, in his army. So what about all those guys who wanted to marry her? Well, the deal was simple. If you wanted to be her husband, you had to beat her in a wrestling match. And if you lost, you owed her your horses. This number right here, that's how many horses she supposedly won. 10,000. That's not just a herd of horses, that is a massive, undefeated trophy collection. And listen, wrestling was just the beginning. She was the complete package when it came to being a Mongol warrior. We're talking expert archer, incredible horse fighter, and not just a soldier, but a brilliant military strategist. These weren't just hobbies. She was out there on the battlefield, leading campaigns and earning a reputation as a commander you did not want to mess with. But her story isn't just about her skills in a fight. Her influence went way beyond the battlefield. She was a major political force. So let's dig into that side of her story now. So out of all his children, Khutulun was her father's absolute favorite. He didn't just love her, he relied on her. For political advice, for military strategy, everything. He trusted her so much that before he died, he actually tried to name her as the next Khan, the ruler of the entire Khanate. I mean, this was practically unheard of in a society with such strict male lines of succession. This symbol you're looking at, the tamga, it's basically the seal of her family. It represents this incredible power and legacy she was born into. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was a key figure in a dynasty that was fighting for control over the enormous Mongol Empire. Now here's the kicker. When her father tried to make her the next Khan, some reports say she actually turned it down. Why? Well, she said she'd rather let her brother take the title as long as she could stay in command of the military and run the day-to-day business. Basically, she wanted the real power, not just the fancy crown. So this brings us to the big question, right? How did this unbelievably powerful, real-life warrior politician turn into a fictional princess obsessed with riddles? Let's just put it side by side. The reality, Khutulun, a real Mongol warrior who proved her dominance through physical combat. The legend, Turandot, a made-up Chinese princess who used brain teasers. Khutulun was a feared political and military leader. Turandot is a story about a proud woman who gets tamed by a man's love. In her own culture, Khutulun is a hero. In the West, her story became one about a woman who eventually succumbs. It's a pretty stark difference. Now, this whole transformation didn't just happen overnight. It was a long journey. So let's take a look at how her story has been told and retold all the way up to today. The journey is just wild when you lay it out. It starts around 1300 with Marco Polo's first-hand accounts. Then, pretty much radio silence for 400 years, until 1710, when a French writer takes her story and completely changes it, swapping wrestling for riddles and changing her name to Turandot. Over 200 years after that, Puccini's opera makes that fictional version a global phenomenon. And now, almost another 100 years later, we're seeing a comeback with a Mongolian film made specifically to reclaim her story. And her name is definitely popping up more and more. She was a character in the Netflix series Marco Polo, a champion racehorse in Australia was named after her, and back in Mongolia, she's the hero of tons of modern books and stories.
That 2021 movie even got a streaming release in the US just recently, which shows you there's a real growing interest in who she actually was.
So, we're left with this pretty big question. Khutulun's story is a perfect example of how easily a powerful woman's real history can get twisted and reshaped into a narrative that's, well, a little more palatable, maybe. One where her physical strength gets turned into a brain game, and her power is eventually conquered by romance. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other stories have been changed in the telling, and whose true histories are still out there, just waiting to be rediscovered?